So, free trade, immigration, robots. What's the common denominator in the culture in which we live in today? All three, over the last year, 2 years, I have noticed are perceived as threats. Threats to people's jobs, threats to the American way of life. All three are perceived as destroyers of jobs. American jobs, our jobs, are being attacked by immigrants, by trade, by robots. So let's go over all three, right? I mean, it's kind of obvious that these are real threats. There's a certain number of jobs in the economy, and people are coming across the border, legally or illegally, for manual, very simple jobs, and some very sophisticated jobs in Silicon Valley. And for every person who comes across and gets a job, obviously, they're underpricing an American who already has the job, and they're taking the job from him. The world, there are only so many jobs in the world after all. I mean, you laugh, but this is the argument. There are only so many jobs in the world. And every time we let somebody in, somebody is going to lose their job. Or, a more sophisticated interpretation of this, and you hear this a lot, they're going to compete with this American, and therefore, and since they're coming from a foreign country, and since they're probably coming from a poorer country, they're willing, in order to come to the United States to work for less, they're going to drive wages down. So immigration is both a job destroyer and a cause for the lowering of our standard of living, the lowering of our American wages. And we can laugh at this, but there's an element of truth here, and we'll get to that, right? This is not a completely nutty idea. Not a completely nutty idea. So that's immigration. It's kind of simple, very perceptual, very obvious. We can see what's going on. Trade is very similar. Look, if somebody can do the job in China for less money than you can, maybe they're less productive, but they're a lot cheaper. And if companies figure out that the transportation costs, as we know in container ships today, the transportation costs are close to zero. It's amazing the revolution in transportation that has happened over the last 20, 30 years with these massive container ships. You can transport stuff from China to the United States at a very low cost. And if they're willing to do it cheaper, then they're taking our jobs. And for every job created in China, and God, there are 1.4 billion people over there, we lose a job in manufacturing or in computers, in programming. I mean, there are millions of programmers in China. And most Silicon Valley companies have vast facilities in China with programmers and engineers. And every job they have, obviously we lose. And again, yeah, I mean, we can laugh at that and we can understand the bigger picture, but there's a certain truth there. There's a certain element of reality. There's competition. There's 1.4 billion Chinese that have woken up, and they want a life, and they want a job, and they want to increase their standard of living. And some people argue, and some people try to convince us, and many Americans now believe that it's at their expense. And again, a kind of a zero-sum mentality. But there's a certain truth there. And of course, robots, God, right? I mean, think about it. We're just at the cusp of a revolution. And already, 90% of all the manufacturing jobs in the United States that, we have about half the manufacturing jobs we had at our peak in 1979. Most of those jobs, 90% of those jobs that went away because of technology, because of robots. Primitive robots, simple robots, unsophisticated robots. Just imagine when they get smart. And not just smart, but mobile. I mean, one of the biggest problems with robots, when you read about this, is to get them to move. It turns out that our ability to move the way we move, the ability of animals to move, is an incredibly sophisticated problem to solve. But, we're getting better at it. And robots one day will be able to move, if not as well as us, close enough to take our jobs, and all kinds of jobs. And there's no end now to the kind of jobs that potentially could be taken. Right? Anywhere from manufacturing jobs, simple jobs, where you're stamping the same thing over and over again, and that's kind of being taken away, to far more sophisticated jobs. And not just manual labor jobs. We did, you heard from Boaz, I think, about this event we do in Israel, the Best Startup in Israel, Atlas Shrugged Award for Best Startup in Israel. And this year, the winner of that award was a company called Zebra Medical Imaging Technologies, or something like that, right? And what does this company do? Well, they've got an AI, an artificial intelligence machine learning system that basically analyzes mammograms and is far better than any radiologist in identifying breast cancer. Radiologists out there, and I know there are a bunch of you here, they're going to take your jobs. They're going to take your jobs. And again, we're under threat. And what we've seen over the last year or two is all of this kind of bubbling up. And this is not a right-wing thing, and this is not a left-wing thing, because you see it across the board. You see it in the anti-immigration debate. You see it in the anti-trade debate, a debate I never thought we'd actually have, but we are having, it turns out. And you're seeing it in the panic about robots. And it's panic. You're seeing it even in Silicon Valley. You're seeing it on the left and right in immigration, across the entire political spectrum. People are coming to take our jobs. Robots are coming to take our jobs. And what should we do? Well, we should be afraid. And we should build walls. And we should restrict trade. And we haven't quite reached the point where we should start restricting technology, but I'm just waiting for a politician to suggest that. And you know what? I think a bunch of people would vote for that. Now, this is America. This is not the attitude that one would expect in America. We're in Pittsburgh, one of the great cities of the Industrial Revolution in America. A city that saw its population grow tenfold in 60 years. Why? Because tons of immigrants came into Pittsburgh and stole jobs. It's a city that saw its population grow tenfold. Why? Because it embraced technology, new technologies. It's a city that grew tenfold because it embraced the idea of win-win trade, right? The American spirit has always been a spirit of risk-taking, of facing the future boldly, of being exciting about the prospects of the future. And yet, we live in a world today where so many people are afraid, are scared. And where our politicians encourage that. Where intellectuals encourage that. They encourage fear, skepticism, pessimism, helplessness with regard to the future. And something new, well, something not new, but something that I think is solidifying more and more in the America we live in today. This notion of collectivism, our jobs, American jobs. What is that? I mean, I have a job. I hope you guys have a job. But they're no our jobs. They're no American jobs. But for decades now, Americans have been taught in our schools, at our universities, by our politicians, and by our welfare state that continues to reinforce the message. You can't take care of yourself. You need help. You're not alone. The individual doesn't count. What counts is the group, and the group is there to help you and assist you and provide for you. Don't worry. Don't save for retirement. Don't save for retirement, please, because we've got it taken care of. Don't think long term. We've got it taken care of. Don't think about health care, because we're going to take care of it. Haven't quite got there, but we're going to. Right? Don't think for yourself. Don't plan for yourself. We, the government, the intellectuals, the people in power, are going to take care of you. And at some point, that just continues, that continuous reinforcement, that continuous build-up has ground that American spirit down. I was reading Ayn Rand's Don't Let Go a few days ago, which she wrote in 1971, where she talked about the American sense of life, the sense of life of independence, of don't tread on me, of I can do it and I can make it happen. And she talks there about, it's going to take many generations for this to go away. This is such a strong sense of life. And here we are sitting in 2017, 2 generations already passed. I don't know how many generations she believed it would take to grind down. But it seems, at least, that it's being ground down. It's depressing. And I'm sorry, it's the last talk and the last day of the conference. But it's depressing. The world out there, when we look at what's going on, the political world, is depressing. When we look at what Americans, at least a significant number of Americans, I don't know if it's a majority yet, but a significant number of Americans, what they want, what they vote for, what they get excited about, whether it's Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, it's depressing. It's a collectivistic vision of helplessness, a collectivistic vision of fear for the future, fear for themselves, fear for America. And this is where the country is. This is being realistic. This is where we've come to. Right? Now, there are pockets where things are different. And we saw examples of this afternoon here on stage. Right? Think of Blake Scholes. Think of Keith Schott. Not helpless, optimistic, positive, willing to go, innovative, excited, not fearful at all about the future. And you see that spirit in places like Silicon Valley. You see that spirit in the kind of people who are building robots, right? Who want to build robots, who believe in a future, who believe in what's possible in the future. And that's the spirit I think we, as I think the only real philosophical representatives of what America is about, need to stand for. It's what we need to give voice to, what we need to give a philosophy to. Because I don't believe the American sense of life can come back by itself. I don't believe the American sense of life can be brought back by conservatives or liberals or anybody in the middle. It's a remnant of the founding. It's the remnant of the spirit of that founding. It's lasted 250 years, but it needs new blood, or it needs new ideas. It needs to be refreshed philosophically. We are the people who need to refresh it philosophically. It's Ayn Rand, it's objectivism that needs to refresh this American sense of life with a proper philosophy.
Here in the United States, perhaps the most challenging and unusual new philosophy has been forged by a novelist, Ayn Rand. Miss Rand's point of view is still comparatively unknown in America, but if it ever did take hold, it would revolutionize our lives. And Ayn, to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize, I know this is difficult, can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it Objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith. Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason. A morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
How does objectivism differ from the philosophies that many of us have been exposed to in our youths? Philosophies based upon religions, theologians, dogmatists.
The very first difference, objectivism tells you that it is not right, it is not proper to man to take anything on faith. Religion is a matter of faith. You accept a religion emotionally or because you were born to it. You have not chosen it rationally. What objectivism will tell you is that reason, man's reason, is his basic means of survival. That is the most important faculty which he has, and he has to guide his life and make his choices by means of his rational faculty. He has to make his own choices, but he has to know how to make them. It is immoral for him to act on his emotions, to be guided by the whim of the moment. That objectivism holds as very wrong, very immoral. And morality, in fact, consists of following your reason to the best of your ability. So that rationality is the basic virtue from which all the others proceed.
My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
Tell me the value of selfishness.
Use another word, self-esteem. The value of selfishness is that you esteem yourself as a value, that you live according to your nature, which means by the judgment of your own mind, and you respect your own mind, you respect your own ability to do the right thing, therefore you respect the possibility of being a morally virtuous person, and you regard yourself as a value worth preserving. To make a success of yourself in any line of rational activity is a great virtue. And people will attack you for exercising your ability, for hard work, for consistency, for ambition. And they will want to make you feel guilty of it. That is the greatest evil, according to my philosophy.
And wait, say that again. The greatest evil, according to your philosophy, is to attack an individual because of virtue.
What I call it is to experience or act on hatred of the good for being the good. That is attacking people for their virtues, for their achievements, for anything they have which is a value, actually, not for their flaws and not for their evil. In fact, people who preach that are the ones who are mawkish about the evil people, the failures, the liars, the cheats, everybody who is weak suddenly acquires some kind of value. But anyone who is a success has to be attacked for his success.
And look at how you have been attacked.
Oh, I know.
How you have been criticized. There
know
are many people in this country, forgive me, in this world who think you're daft.
They don't. They want you to sing that.